This is The Roger Stone Show.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone right here on The Roger Stone Show. When I saw President Donald Trump's address to the nation on Thursday night, and he said that the Communist Chinese had obtained approximately 220 million U.S. voter files beginning during the 2020 election cycle, I knew that the guest I wanted for today's show was journalist Gordon Chang. Gordon Chang is, shall we say, an old China hand, although not that old. He lived and worked in Shanghai and Hong Kong for almost 2 decades, has been a columnist for Newsweek, Newsmax, has written regularly for The Hill, The Wall Street Journal, and others. He's the author of numerous excellent books on China, but his most recent book, Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America, is available today on Amazon. And you can follow him on X at Gordon G. Chang. Gordon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much, Roger.
So let me start here. Given the scale of China's reported acquisition of voter data from multiple states, how do you assess whether this represents primarily an intelligence collection effort for long-term targeting of U.S. elites, maybe the diaspora communities here, and swing voters, or is it more likely a foundational step towards more active influence operations like, I don't know, micro-targeting, disinformation, or proxy voting registration? In other words, Gordon Chang, what do you make of this?
Well, all of the above, Roger. There are a couple things going on. So first of all, China just hoovers up all the information about the United States that it can because it feeds it into its AI systems. It tries to come up with a big picture of the United States. And China has more data about us than perhaps the federal government does. But what they do, and you suggested it, they use this data about individuals. They cross-reference it. They're looking for people who are vulnerable, people who they can turn, people who will provide information and do other things for Beijing. And so, for instance, it's not just voter data. And when we looked at the attacks on the networks of the Office of Personnel Management, also going through insurance records at Anthem, they're looking for people who need money or who are somewhat vulnerable for one or another reason. So, yes, this just adds to their picture of Americans that they can target.
So after the president's disclosures highlighting China's acquiring this document, how might the CCP integrate the voter data with its United Front Work Department activities? In other words, are we looking at AI-driven analytics to shape future U.S. election narratives, suppress turnout, or is this something much, much broader?
Well, I think it's certainly for those two things that you mentioned, and for, I'm sure, other things as well. We know that the party has a comprehensive plan to assault America. They use the Communist Party's United Front Work Department, which is the part of the party that subverts foreign governments. So, yes, I'm sure that they have all sorts of uses for that data.
If you're just tuning in, we're talking to Gordon Chang. You can follow him on X at Gordon G. Chang. He is an outstanding author, and he is my go-to guy when it comes to any question regarding China. He's written numerous books. His latest book, Plan Red, China's Plan to Destroy America, is available right now on Amazon. Cannot recommend it to you highly enough. Gordon, what is your assessment regarding the current political stability in China? There have been reports of instability within the Chinese Communist Party. There's been reports of tensions between the Chinese military and the Chinese leadership. What is your assessment in this regard?
If we look at the civilian part of the party, I think that Xi Jinping has been able to overcome a very difficult patch that he had last year. On the military side of things, and remember the Chinese military reports to the Communist Party, not to the Chinese central government. On the military side of things, I think things have gotten worse. There's been all sorts of purges, including China's #1 most senior uniformed officer, General Zhang Yaoshao, who was put under investigation in January of this year. There are a lot of people who will say, Roger, that because Xi Jinping fires people, that he's in control of the military. I can understand the argument, but the fact that he is continually firing people, and he's been doing this for more than a decade now, that shows that he's not in control of the military. Because if he were in control of the military, he wouldn't have to fire people. So I think we have a military which is resisting Xi Jinping. On the Communist Party's Central Military Commission, which controls the military, there's normally 7 seats. Only 2 of them now are filled. One of them is Xi Jinping himself, and the second is a general who is a political commissar. In other words, there are no operational officers left on the Central Military Commission. And that shows you the disarray in the Chinese military at this moment.
What would you say of the combat readiness of today's Chinese military? In other words, putting aside the political questions or even the timing, are they capable of launching an effort to seize Taiwan at this point? Do they have the readiness or the capability to do that?
That's a really important question. If you're talking about nuclear weapons, yes, they can turn Taiwan into a radioactive slab and then just walk in. But if you're talking about conventional weapons only, I think the answer is probably no. And the reason is that in order for China to take Taiwan, they have to do something that they've never done in Chinese history, which is a combined air-land-sea operation. It takes enormous coordination. And as I just mentioned, you have at the top all of these officers who have been disappeared. And you need to have that coordination in order to have a successful invasion. If you're talking about something less ambitious, yes, China is able to do things. So, for instance, there are islands of Taiwan which are no more than 3 or 4 miles from the main Chinese coast. So, for instance, the island of Kinmen, which is just off of Fujian province. There, the Chinese can walk in anytime they want. And that's even despite the political disarray, because those are not hard military operations. But if you're talking about the things that we worry about, the main island of Taiwan, that's 110 miles of water. That is very difficult to cross.
Do most Americans underestimate the extent of Chinese communist espionage going on in this country today?
Yes. And we just saw that from what the president said. 220 million voter files. I mean, that's an astounding number when you consider that's about the same number of U.S. voters. So really what we're talking about is a comprehensive effort. And in general, we do not understand the comprehensive nature of China's assault on us or the maliciousness of the Chinese regime. And that is very dangerous for us.
You make an excellent point. The country, as I understand, is riddled with their own police stations, which are ostensibly here for the purposes of policing Chinese citizens in the United States, but who I suspect's involvement in espionage is far, far broader.
Yes.
The other thing here that continues to amaze me is the way that our government continues to allow the Chinese to acquire assets within this country, either directly nor indirectly. If you go to the U.S. Department of Agriculture's most recent report on how much farm or ranch land is owned by Chinese interests, not only do I think it's inaccurate, I think it's woefully underestimating those efforts. To what do you ascribe the fact that we don't seem to have the national will to end China from buying us up? I keep hearing that phrase that China will take over this country without firing a shot, as long as they are, I would say, infiltrating every strata of American society, whether it's academia, whether it is business, whether it's the Fortune 500 companies. I mean, this seems to me to be the real danger.
Yes, well, first of all, you're absolutely right about the underreporting, because a lot of Chinese buy agricultural or ranch land with cash, and they do not report it to the U.S. Commerce Department, and that means the U.S. Agriculture Department doesn't get accurate numbers. On you answered your question, we're Americans. which means we've got a democracy, and democracies historically have been slow to react to dangers. And this is something that we can go back to Tocqueville in the 19th century, and he wrote about it, or we can go to the 20th century where you have the great geopolitical strategist from Britain, John Halford Mackinder, talk about how democracies are so slow to react. Plus, we've got another couple problems, and that is after the Cold War, we felt that history had ended, as Francis Fukuyama said, so we all went to sleep. And we thought that we could engage China, integrate it into the international system, and as we did that, we allowed China to create basically segments of the U.S. population that were beholden to China because of economic investment or whatever ties. So there are a lot of reasons for our inability to deal with China, but we got to start waking up because the Chinese are not slowing down.
Folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to journalist Gordon Chang. You can find him at Gordon G. Chang on X. You can find his profile under Gordon G. Chang. Once again, all of his books are outstanding. His most recent book, Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America, now available on Amazon. I highly recommend it to you. Gordon, what would you say about the current relationship between Russia and China? In our opening segment, we talked about Richard Nixon's very skillful playing them off against each other in order to win a strategic arms limitation agreement back in the 70s. They are a country, although at one time both considered to be quote-unquote communist, they share a long border and hundreds of years of distrust. If Joe Biden seemed to me to achieve anything, he appears to have pushed them together.
Well, what we've got with China and Russia are two countries whose they see their interests generally the same way. So, for instance, in the war in Ukraine, China has supported Russia across the board. There are Chinese mercenaries fighting for Russia, and there are officers of the People's Liberation Army at the front in Ukraine. So this is a multidimensional relationship. I know that a lot of people say, and they're quite correct, we don't have to worry about China and Russia, in the long run. So if we're talking the 2060s or 2070s, I'm sure that's correct. But we're talking about the 2020s. And right now, we see these two nations work very closely. They've got their problems. That was evident when basically Beijing shut down the negotiations with Russia over the Power of Siberia 2 gas pipeline. That certainly hurt Russia, but it also hurt China as well. And I think that Xi Jinping made a big mistake in not carrying through with those negotiations. So there are problems in the relationship, but in general, I think that Putin is more important in that relationship than most people think. And the reason is Putin is willing to do things that China would like to do, but feels it shouldn't do. So, for instance, destabilizing the international system, taking on the United States. These are things Xi Jinping would love to do, and Putin is doing it, which is the reason why, in general, China is supporting Russia across the board.
Excellent analysis. Folks, once again, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to Gordon Chang, journalist, author of Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America, which you can get at Amazon now. I highly recommend all of his books. I like China is Going to War. That was among your books. That was one of my favorites. Once again, you can follow Gordon at Gordon G. Chang on X. And I asked Gordon here today for his expert analysis on this breaking news that the Communist Chinese had accessed 220 million U.S. voter files, which Gordon Chang correctly points out is about the number of voters in the United States. We're going to continue with Gordon Chang on the other side. You're listening to the Stone Zone right here on The Roger Stone Show, and we'll be right back.
Now, it's time for Protecting Your Future, sponsored by American Sovereign Bullion. Here's Roger Stone.
This is Roger Stone, and it's time for Protecting Your Future. When uncertainty rises, smart investors look for stability. For generations, gold and silver have helped protect purchasing power through inflation, market swings, and economic uncertainty and turbulence. Learn how precious metals like gold and silver can help diversify and protect what matters most to you, your financial future. Start building your financial foundation today by going to dyingdollar.com. That's dyingdollar.com. You'll be glad you did.
This is The Roger Stone Show.
Listen, all you New Yorkers. Excuse me, taxi. Okay, man, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
This is The Roger Stone Show.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back in the Roger Stone Show. We're talking to journalist Gordon Chang. He is the author of Plan Red, China's project to destroy America. He is long reported from both Shanghai and Hong Kong, and I think is probably the single most knowledgeable journalist in the country on all things communist China. Here's a more esoteric question for you, Gordon. By the way, you can follow Gordon at Gordon G. Chang on X. That's Gordon G. Chang. I recommend that you do so. And when I saw that the president was announcing this breach of $220 million voter files, I immediately wanted Gordon for today's show, and I'm grateful to him for joining us. Gordon, here's a more esoteric question. The president has defended the hundreds of thousands of Chinese students here on student visas, although I think that I have some trepidation about that. How do you feel on that question? And then to a broader question, if the president called you in the next 20 minutes and said, Gordon, what's your advice on how to handle the threat of China, what would you say?
Thanks, Roger. First of all, the president wanted to essentially double the number of Chinese nationals in our colleges and universities. I don't think so. I don't think that's a good idea. And the reason is, first of all, there's a lot of espionage that those students commit. They committed at the direction of Ministry of State security agents and Chinese consular officials in our country. And that is an enormous issue because perhaps 13% of them engage in illegal espionage. Also, just more generally, and this is not just Chinese students, but this is students from other countries, and that is every place that is taken by a foreign student means one fewer place for an American. And we know that the Chinese are concentrated in the STEM topics, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. This is where we need to teach our young. So I worry about that. And if the president were to call in 20 minutes, I would just say this. I think I would say that, look, we have to understand how dangerous the Chinese regime is and how fast Beijing is moving. Xi Jinping talks about going to war all the time. We need the president of the United States to talk to the American people to get ourselves ready. Because if we get ourselves ready, the worst won't happen. You talked about those secret police stations on American soil. Yes, the FBI closed one of them in Chinatown in New York City, but according to the New York Post and the Daily Caller, there are about 7 to 9 more in the United States spread all across the country. We've already found 2 Chinese biological weapons labs and facilities on our soil. God knows what else is going on. We see the Chinese with these drones over our military bases. We just have to act very fast to roll up these Chinese networks.
Yeah, but there's no question we need to be more aggressive. Even in legislation passed in my home state of Florida, which on the surface of it appears to restrict the Chinese from acquiring lands here, when you read the small print, it is limited to lands that are next to a quote-unquote national security facility, although that is not defined anyplace else in the law. Not even sure what that means. We have about a minute left. I want to remind folks about your new book, Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. You can find that on Amazon. I strongly recommend that to you. All of Gordon's books are most excellent. And follow him on X. He's at Gordon G. Chang. Gordon, we have 1 minute left. Your final thought.
Well, the most important thing right now is to realize how fast the Chinese are moving. I think that Xi Jinping is in trouble at home, as you talked about, and I think that he believes that causing problems abroad are in his personal interest, not to rally the Chinese people because they don't want war, but to make sure that other Communist Party figures don't challenge him. So he can lash out and he can be very dangerous.
All right, there you have it. I want to thank my guest, Gordon Chang. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to The Roger Stone Show, and we'll be right back.